But there were other great victories at the time as well in this period, which particularly was the victory of Lebanese Hezbollah, again in the so-called July War of 2006, which saw a formal military confrontation between the white settler colonial project of Israel in its aggression against Lebanon, backed up again, once again, by its senior colleagues in London, Paris and Washington. But that was defeated in an open battle, and people remember the famous slogan of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Lebanese Hezbollah, who said, "We will fight you in Tel Aviv, beyond Tel Aviv and beyond Tel Aviv," which was an admission and a declaration of the military strategical intent of the revolutionary forces in Lebanon. But subsequent to 2006, and all of this has to be put into context of the global situation, which since the late 90s, since the election particularly of Hugo Chavez, the relative rise of China and Putin's leadership, and the changes in so-called Latin America, we saw that the global forces were moving against the unipolarity in the world, which was achieved post-1991 as a result of the collapse of the multipolar world, which was manifest particularly in the socialist Eastern Bloc. So this all contributed to this great strategical victories that was taking place chronologically since the late 90s into the latter first decade of the new millennium of the 2000s. Now, then we had this very complex situation whereby Hamas took over Gaza in 2007. It has its positives and has its negatives. The positives is that Gaza became a liberated territory of revolutionary mobilization of the Palestinian people on their land itself. The negative was that it deepened the schism between the two main families of the Palestinian national camp, which is Hamas on the one hand and Fatah on the other. And also it played a negative impact in terms of Hamas on the one hand and the other associated factions in the PLO as well, not just between Hamas and Fatah. Nevertheless, Gaza was a double-edged sword, but then we saw the disaster, which was the Arab Spring, or which I call NATO's Arab Sting in the region, which has devastated and divided and de facto partitioned Syria into a death squad state that's run by Daesh or ISIS. We've seen the destruction of Libya. We've seen great great destabilization in Egypt and Lebanon and Jordan and in Tunisia, and of course in Yemen as well. And all this has contributed to a collapse of the regional capacity, or the Arab capacity, in meeting its historical challenges of unity against the common enemy, which is in London, Paris and Washington and in Tel Aviv. So we're now at a juncture where it's a very precarious situation for Gaza and the Palestinians. We have a complex situation with the Egyptian state, which is very controversial amongst the pro-Palestinian circles. So we're in a very complex situation. So what my advice would be to everyone, I think the BDS movement is important, but the BDS movement should never become a replacement for appreciating and respecting the historical and current revolutionary nature of the Palestinian struggle against neo-colonialism. The BDS movement should never become a kind of conscious or indirect tool of Eurocentric communities or political communities in the West to colonize the Palestinian struggle. That the Palestinian struggle's main hand to play in its own liberation, and only the Palestinians will liberate themselves. No one else is going to liberate any particular oppressed community for them. No, that job has to be done for that oppressed community itself, lest that people's struggle is co-opted and distorted by outside forces. So I think we have to continue to play up and analyze in a revolutionary way, in an anti-imperialist revolutionary way, the challenges that beset and confront the Palestinian people, but also the Syrian people, also the people of Lebanon and Egypt and Jordan and Libya and so on and so forth. Because we cannot have a building of Palestinian national capacity when all around it everything is collapsing and turning into, and fire is consuming everything around it. No, the Arab Sting is also an Arab Sting directed against and in opposition and against the interests of the Palestinian people and their just and heroic struggle. So all these kind of threads need to be tied together in understanding this complex situation in which we find ourselves, and particularly the people of the region find themselves. And so I think that's the reason why myself and the other colleagues in the Tricontinental in London recently organized an event with Leila Khaled speaking from Amman via video internet link to our conference discussing Gaza and the Palestinian Revolution, linking together Gaza with the historical and current revolutionary movement of Palestine, and linking that again, and Leila Khaled made some very pertinent points in relation to how the Palestinian liberation is directly in relation to Syria as well. If Syria is burning, if Syria was the historical and continuing home for the Palestinian revolutionary factions to train, to have safety, etc., but obviously the Arab Sting against Syria is also an attack on Palestine. The Arab Sting in Syria is also designed to then, which is currently unfortunately taking place, to get those Western-backed death squads of Daesh and other factions such as Nusra al-Sham and all these other death squad factions to then negatively impact Lebanon. Why? Because they want to neutralize the biggest ally, the biggest non-state ally of the Palestinian Revolution, which is Lebanese Hezbollah. So these are some, not all, these are some, perhaps most, of the complexities that really face us when conducting our solidarity work for Palestine. And as I've said many times before, it was not the students of Britain and France and the United States, etc., that liberated Vietnam. However just the stand of those students and the left of the West was, no, it was the heroic feats and the 3 million martyrs of the Vietnamese liberation movement that liberated the Vietnamese people from French and then US imperialism. It was not the Labour Party or the left in England or in Europe or North America which liberated the South Africans from apartheid and white supremacist rule. No, it was the Black Revolution and the revolutionaries in South Africa that achieved that. Similarly, it's not the BDS movement around the world or in the West which is going to liberate the Palestinians. It's a just tactic to have. It's important to develop, but that is not going to liberate them, and we shouldn't then fall into a Eurocentric, patronizing discourse in relation to Palestine, thinking that the BDS is going to be the start and end all of the Palestinian struggle. No, the Palestinian struggle is being conducted by the Palestinians in Palestine itself, and that must remain our focus in popularizing the Palestinian struggle. There's no point trying to wrap up the Palestinian struggle, any people's struggle of the global South, in a way that is more acceptable to Westerners or the West, because the West is directly implicated in the historical and ongoing oppression and problems which the peoples of the global South face themselves. And as the global South and the BRICS and allied countries of the global South are rising in capacity, the West will lash out more. It will become more frenzied, it will become more violent, it will become more dastardly and sly in trying to prolong and elongate its attempts at hegemony across the world. And the only answer to that is greater unity of us with Palestine, with Zimbabwe, with Libya, with Syria, with Russia, with China, with Socialist Korea, with Venezuela and Cuba and all these others. These are the forces which are going to unite and find common liberation. So I thank you once again for allowing me to contribute to your conference. I hope some of the comments I've made will get you thinking and contribute in an interesting way to the discussions that you're having. And I'd like to thank you once again, and I'm sorry I can't be on your beautiful island in the Mediterranean, but I wish you the best and leave you with a message. And the message that I most cherish is that we unite or we perish. Thank you.